Okay, well, good morning, everybody. I think we are going to get started. We're going to officially call the meeting to order. And if I could, again, just remind everyone to, if you have cell phones or anything, just put those on silent. We want folks to take pictures and all that sort of thing, but we're going to do everything we can to keep the meeting moving forward and with as few disruptions as possible. Technically, this, each of the councils takes a turn. We're not doing our road show anymore, per se, although I guess technically we're not in the State House, so we're, extending the road show a little bit. But Councilor Kenny is hosting this meeting, so to kick things off, I would ask Councilor Kenny wants to do a reading of the pledge.
Absolutely. Everybody rise. Enjoy the prayer for unity by Jay and the family. In this century, in any other century, our deepest hope, our most tender prayer, is that we learn to listen. May we listen to one another in openness and mercy. May we listen to plants and animals in wonder and respect. May we listen to our hearts in love and forgiveness. May we listen to God in quietness and awe. And in this listening, which is boundless in its beauty, may we find the wisdom to cooperate with a healing spirit, a divine spirit, who beckons us into peace, community, and creativity. We do not ask for a perfect world, but we do ask for a better world. We ask for deep listening. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Kenny. Wow, I'm going to do my best there. I'll keep it as far away from you as I can. So I will now officially call this meeting of the Governor and Executive Council to order. We'll begin by asking for a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the October 13th, 2021 Executive Council meeting. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or addendums to those meeting minutes? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of accepting the meeting minutes as presented, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the meeting minutes are approved. Next, from the Office of the Secretary of State, we have our civil commissions. Could I please have a motion to confirm the list of civil commissions? All in favor of the civil commissions as identified, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The list of civil commissions is approved. Are there any names to place on the list of civil commissions? No? Okay, hearing none, the matters of civil commissions is concluded. We do have two resignations we need to accept today. From the Board of Mental Health Practice, could I please have a motion to accept the resignation of Kerry Fuel of Homestead?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the resignation of Ms. Fuel is accepted. From the Public Utilities Commission, could I please have a motion to accept the resignation of Diane Martin of Deerfield?
Second.
Any discussion? Well, I'll just have my 2 cents. I think Diane has done a phenomenal job as the chairwoman of the PUC. There was a letter I know provided to the council. There's going to, because we have both an energy commissioner coming in, we now technically have made one nomination to the PUC. We'll have to making another nomination to the PUC today, and we'll be after moving. I'll also be nominating Dan Goldner to be the chairperson today as well. So it's going to be kind of a lot moving in the energy sector, and but I think she's done a phenomenal job, and we just want to make sure that the group as a whole can keep meeting with the quorum that they're going to need. There are a lot of docket items coming before the PUC. So musical chairs, but also a huge opportunity for the state. And I think she's done a phenomenal job. I don't think she's going very far. I think she'll still be somewhere in the greater Concord area, my guess, but we'll see what happens. She's pretty incredible. So with that, all in favor of accepting the Resignation of Diane Martin, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And with that, Ms. Martin's resignation is accepted. Moving on to our confirmations. Could I please have a motion to confirm Diane Chase of Nashua to the Board of Acupuncture Licensing? So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ms. Chase is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Catherine Weiss of Nashua to the Board of Landscape Architects?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And Catherine is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Deborah Robinson of Guilford to the Board of Mental Health Practice?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ms. Robinson's confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Jared Reynolds of Concord to the Community Development Finance Authority?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Jared is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Michael Claflin of Sugar Hills to the Community Development Finance Authority?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Michael is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Mary Duquette of Hopkinton to the Dental Hygienist Committee?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Sorry. Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that was Mary Duquette. Mary is confirmed.
I turned mine on.
Yeah. Oh, really? Okay. Well, all right. I'll just, that's me getting very sensitive. Wow. They can't find chips for cars, but I got the chips in these things. Okay. Moving on, could I please have a motion to confirm Christine Brennan as the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Education?
Second.
I'd like to make this comment, just a
Sure.
correction. It's actually my constituent. She lives in Washington.
Oh.
She's lived there for several
She
years
lives-
now, but I just wanted to make that correction.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I apologize. I didn't have the town there. Everyone wants to lay claim to Chris Brennan. I get it. It's pretty great. Any discussion on Deputy Commissioner Brennan? Okay, hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And Chris Brennan is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Rich Labors of Concord as the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Employment Security?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Councilor Jones.
It's Batman and Robin in the Employment Security, so with that team of that Commissioner Katalis and Rich Labors, it's a dynamic duo, and particularly during COVID, unprecedented stresses and workloads, they were managed to really come through the state of New Hampshire. And Rich has become kind of a media darling and star, and he's very articulate, and Mr. Katalis is very glad to have him, so thank you.
No, Commissioner Kavanis is great at taking the credit for all of Rich's hard work. There's no doubt about that. It's really, that's quite phenomenal. I would just say, through the COVID pandemic, Rich was there every step of the way, obviously dealing with unprecedented, literally one week to the next, dealing with the best unemployment levels to the worst, and then now one of the best again. What people don't also appreciate, I don't know if Rich is here, I don't even like bragging Rich, but the way that Rich and George and their team controlled the potential for the unemployment fraud that went to the tune of billions and billions and billions and billions across this country. And the controls that were put in it while still allowing for the process to move forward is really actually unprecedented. I don't know if the states have ever been ranked, but I think it'd be hard for us to find a state that did manage it better than we did. I mean, when I hear the stories of billions and billions in California, billions of dollars of fraud in Florida, billions of dollars of fraud in New York. And here we were able to really manage it down to less than 1% or something, and very little of that, the cash went out the door and all that kind of stuff. So it was really incredible because it was a rampant problem in the country that really went unnoticed, unfortunately. But these guys really did a great job, and probably as much credit as we give them, never got all the credit that they deserve. And the team, too. I know you have a really great team over there, George. So. Okay, so with that, could all in favor of Rich Labors, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And Rich Labors is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Ken Dunn of Homestead as the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Information Technology?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Kenneth Dunn is confirmed. Terrific. Could I please have a motion to confirm Paul Raymond Jr. of Concord as the Director of Security and Training at the Department of Corrections?
So moved.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Paul Raymond is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Keely Noyes of New Boston to the Family Mediator Certification Board, and just to make a note that this confirmation would be effective upon confirmation with the term ending 2022. I think that's a slight correction from what was originally presented. Right. September, it would be up in September with the term ending September 6, 2022. Thank you.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The noise is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Francis Lane of Newfield as the Family Mediator Certification Board?
So moved.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Francis is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Neil Irvine of New Hampton to the Fire Standards and Training Commission?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And Neil is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Sean Fitzgerald Keene to the Higher Education Commission?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Sean Fitzgerald is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Michael O'Connor of Swansea to the Juvenile Parole Board?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Michael O'Connor is confirmed. Excuse me. Could I please have a motion to confirm Roger Brooks of Concord to the Hampshire State Council on the Arts?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Roger is once again confirmed. How many terms has Roger been there? Third, fourth term? He does a great job. Could I please have a motion to confirm Jason Torres of Sugar Hill to the Hampshire State Council on the Arts?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Jason is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Peter Warburton of Exeter to the Hampshire State Council on the Arts?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Peter's confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Matthew Urbach of Dunbarton as a first-level pharmacist to the Department of Corrections?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Matthew is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Kelly Brown of Candia as a second-level pharmacist for the Department of Corrections?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Kelly Brown is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Essengia Decopoulos of Concord as a third-level pharmacist to the Department of Corrections?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? That is confirmed. So please have a motion to confirm Jeffrey Sims of Bosquen as a fourth level pharmacist with the Department of Corrections.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Jeffrey Sims is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Michelle Davis of Concord to the Water Council?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Michelle Davis is confirmed, and now could I please have a motion to confirm Paula Mauser of Durham to the Waste Management Council?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? With that, Paula is confirmed. That was quite a list. We got through them all. Great job. That concludes our confirmations. Okay, I have some nominations to read in today. To the Air Resources Council, I nominate Rudolph Cartier of Candia. To the Board of Foresters, I nominate Patrick Kenny of Wilton. To the Board of Psychologists, I nominate Robert Walrath of Nashua. As the Commissioner for the Department of Energy, I nominate Jared Coyne of Guilford. To the Dental Hygienist Committee, I nominate Barbara Stowers of New Boston. To the Fire Standards and Training Commission, I nominate Francis Fratzel of Bedford. To the Independent Investment Committee, I nominate Scott Hammond of Canaan. To the New Hampshire Health and Education Facilities Authority, I nominate Margaret Ork-Dolan of Hooksett. To the New Hampshire Real Estate Commission, I nominate Ralph Valentine of Windham. As the Chairman of the Public Utility Commission, I nominate Dan Goldner of Manchester. As a Commissioner of the Public Utility Commission, I nominate Pradeep Chadpudi of Bow. To the Public Water Access Advisory Board, I nominate Michelle Tremblay of Bosquen. And to the Recreational Therapy Governing Board, I nominate Matthew Fry of Northwood. And that concludes today's nominations. So moving on, we have our consent calendar agenda. We'll begin by asking for a motion to adopt the consent calendar agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or request to move any of the items from the consent calendar?
5A.
5A, okay. Okay. Oh, sure. So all in favor of the consent calendar, with the exception of item 5A, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? And the consent calendar is approved. Could I get a motion to adopt consent calendar agenda item 5A? Morning, Commissioner. No, discussion. Council Warmington.
Commissioner, about this contract, this is my opportunity to remind you that when the contract was passed previously over the summer, that we asked that you provide quarterly reports. We believe the first quarterly report was due on October 1, and we haven't seen it yet, so I'm just wondering when we might see that.
We should have something to you by next week.
Great. And I do, by the way, note that, as we're going to see later on in the contract, that you are making some great progress, particularly on the implementation of the critical time intervention.
Yes, very excited about the project.
I understand that this puts in place a screening process to address the potential conflict of interest, and I just would like assurance that the Attorney General has reviewed the amendment.
He has.
It's my understanding that this contract had to be sent to CMS for approval, that we are still awaiting. That approval is pending. That's the original contract. I just want to be sure that this amendment will also be sent to CMS for
Yes, CMS will be required. Sorry, CMS will be required to approve it. Yes.
Thank you.
Counselor Stevens.
So A&M Capital, which is the parent company of A&M Public Sector Services, has a private equity investment in CSI, which provides similar Medicaid services. So my question is, when and how was this potential conflict of interest confirmed, discovered, and the procedures that are put in place for a screen split?
I'm going to have Dave Leaders speak more to the details since he was the lead on this project.
Thank you, Councilor Stevens, for the question. So it was identified in early July that there was a potential conflict of interest with CNSI and private equity of A&M Capital. After that discovery, A&M informed the commissioner and deputy commissioner via email of that potential conflict. We then proceeded to work on this amendment with A&M Capital, A&M, to ensure that there was an information screen, as well as the individuals that were working on the Medicaid work stream. We ensured that there was no information shared regarding future Medicaid strategies or RFPs. And so the idea behind this particular amendment is to address that information screen to ensure that there is no future conflict of interest.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Hearing none, all in favor of adopting consent calendar agenda item 5A, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, consent calendar agenda item 5A. Moving on to our regular agenda. Now ask a motion to adopt agenda item 6 through 7B from the Department of Health and Services Office of the Commissioner. Sorry about that. I want to make sure I was clear. So with motion,
Second.
a second. Any discussion on any of these items? Councilor Foreman.
Yes, Commissioner, on 7B, this is the purchase of Hampstead Hospital. I guess first I would just like to hear from you, how important is this to protecting our system right now? And I understand there's 25 kids waiting in emergency rooms right now. What will this do to relieve that problem?
Sure. So this process began many months ago, and what we found out was that Hampstead was looking for a buyer of their property and approached the state around whether we wanted to buy the property. Hampstead being the only provider of inpatient psychiatric care for children in our state, we felt it was very important to secure this critical service going forward for the citizens of the state. We began the negotiations with them at that point. They are currently operating at a census of about 45. They have a license capacity of 111. I think we're probably going to land somewhere between 80 and 90, just the physical structure of the building. Some of the rooms are quads, four beds in a room. We wouldn't necessarily use it in that way, but I do think we're going to at least have the potential to double the occupancy of that building, and also do specialty care. Definitely increasing the bed count for children, but also looking at a young adult population, young adults between 18 and 25, who often get swept into the adult system and maybe lack the maturity to be in the adult system, have a very specialized unit for that kind of transition age. So there was a lot of very positive things about this hospital and bringing it into the state system. Obviously, the children's system of care, we've invested tens of millions of dollars in that in the last couple of years. In that continuum, inpatient psychiatric care is part of that continuum. If Hampstead was to sell that to a private provider that maybe decided not to service children, then we would be without that service in the state of New Hampshire.
So having adequate space for maybe 9 beds is one thing, having adequate staff is another. How do you expect to staff for that?
You know, I think the purchase and sales agreement is still being negotiated right now. This item specifically is just to accept and expend the federal money. The contract for the purchase and the contract for any contracted services will come back before the council before we can engage in that. But I think the intent right now is to ensure the leadership team at the hospital would be state employees, similar to New Hampshire Hospital, but then we would be looking for a third-party partner to contract out the other clinical services within the hospital.
And will this purchase enable the state to expand the continuum of care to provide additional services as contemplated under the 10-year plan?
Yeah, I think in general, the 10-year plan contemplates having that full continuum of care. One of the things we've talked about for Hampstead Hospital is whether it would be an appropriate place for a PRTS, which is a psychiatric residential treatment facility, which is a psychiatric center for kids that need longer lengths of stay. So typically you'll see a youth with a length of stay of about 10 days. There are youth that need length of stays that are several months. And in those cases right now, a lot of those kids end up going out of state to PRTS. And so we would like to be able to bring those kids back in-state into a local entity. So that is one of the areas that we're thinking about, that it would be an appropriate place to expand the type of people, the type of youth we take care of on that setting.
And these will be ARPA funds that will be used to purchase, make this purchase.
Yes.
And that those ARPA funds are obviously very important to achieving this goal. So, thank you very much.
Good morning. So we'd like to. So as I stated at the press conference, I want to applaud this conversion. I just received word last night of a constituent who had been waiting 27 days for an inpatient bed. And I have a statement from NAMI, New Hampshire, which again applauds this decision, and I'd like to read it. NAMI, New Hampshire welcomes the news of the state of New Hampshire's planned purchase of Hampstead Hospital. While our organization has many questions and looks forward to more details, we believe this is a significant step forward in addressing the current mental health crisis, which has hit youth and young adults especially hard during the pandemic. Consistent with national data, New Hampshire youth and young adults are reporting significant increases in stress, anxiety, and depression. The number of youth experiencing a mental health crisis or in need of inpatient mental health treatment has more than tripled since the start of the pandemic in March of 2020. Yesterday, there were 18 youth being boarded in emergency departments around the state, awaiting inpatient admission. The process of holding a young person in an emergency room with minimal treatment is traumatizing for youth and their families. Despite this dramatic increase in the needs of child and youth inpatient mental health beds, no other hospital has stepped forward to offer additional inpatient capacity for youth. As part of the 2019 New Hampshire state budget and subsequent contract approved by the Governor and Executive Council, Hampstead Hospital agreed to provide inpatient mental health beds for youth starting in March of 2020. Ken Norton stated, as hospital mergers, acquisitions, and closures occur nationwide, NAMI New Hampshire supports Governor Sununu and the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services in taking this step to ensure that New Hampshire families who have a child in mental health crisis will continue to have an option to receive inpatient care. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Further discussion?
Thank you, Governor. I applaud you for the movement to get this hospital into the state control. Can you give us some sort of timeline? Because we're hearing 18 children in emergency room. But that doesn't get into this facility anytime quick. So can you give me a timeline of when you think we'll have staff the ability to put children in this facility?
So we expect, timeline-wise, purchase and sales to be complete by the end of the calendar year. Transition to state control will happen in the early part of 2022. From there, it's going to be the discussion around what type of bed and how to expand. There's currently 45 kids in that building. The expansion of beds, I would think, is going to happen the first half of 2022. Once we have it in state control, we have our third-party partner in, and they start working on recruiting staff, recruiting providers to provide that level of care in the building. So I'm thinking 6 months, 6 to 9 months.
Is there any way we can do a lease to purchase so that we can get control of the building sooner and get the children that are in emergency rooms facility to be in sooner?
I think that there's a period of time that, we're working right now. I'm meeting with a couple of different potential third-party partners. That's going to take several months to negotiate a sole source contract that's going to come back in front of this council in the coming months. They then need to staff up, and it's going to take them several months to staff up to be able to staff this building, or at least to expand. The intent is that the current staff at Hampstead Hospital will have the option of going to work for the third-party provider or for the state if they're in leadership positions. But it's still going to take a couple of months for this third-party partner to staff up to be able to expand the beds. So I don't see it happening before March of 2022 to be able to expand the bed number at Hampstead.
Well, I understand that time is important.
I agree.
Time is more important for the children that are in emergency. There must be a way that we can put our heads together and find a way that the third-party administrator can go in and give the services to the kids that are sitting in emergency. And, and I know government would like to move as quickly as it can. Sometimes it moves very slowly. So I applaud you for saying 6 months. But my feeling is we may not see any council for probably 8 or 9 months.
The RFP, or there's no RFP for the third party. I'm meeting with different third-party partners and intend to bring a sole source for exactly the reason you're talking about. If I put it out to RFP, it's going to be 8 to 9, maybe even 10 months before I can get it in front of you. If I sole source it for the first 2 years, based on my conversations with the different providers, then I can get it in front of you, we're hoping by December, January, and having that in place the early 2022. My staff are already working on developing what that contract looks like. So in a lot of ways, I'm really counting on the council, who has expressed their dislike of sole source contracts, to understand why I'm going to bring this sole source contract to you, is to do exactly what you're saying, Councillor, is to save the time so we can get kids into that hospital as quickly as possible.
Are you talking to more than one source?
Yes.
So it's really not sole source. You're talking to other people.
We're not following the request for proposal process that is laid out in state law.
Well, I hope that we do it as quickly as possible. If we can find another way to do it, we should do it for the kids that are sitting in emergency.
Yes, I will be as expeditious as possible.
Councilor Kenny?
Thank you. I just had a question about Hampstead facility. Is it intended to be a statewide facility?
Yes.
And let me know, how do we address the northern population of kids when it comes to this facility, from taking them out of small rural community areas into potentially a Hampstead
I agree with you, Councillor, that ideally we would have geographically different buildings across the state. That's not what we have right now, but the children's system of care that we've built out for the last couple of years and that we are going to continue to build out, that relies on us being able to provide care to youth and adults in the community by the community. So mobile crisis apartments, things like that, so that the youth of the North Country or in rural parts of the state can get the care in their community. Unfortunately, as is right now, if they need an inpatient stay, Hampstead is going to be the only option. We don't have other providers in our state. So if you're staying in New Hampshire, this is the only option. Several of the children from the North Country often seek care at a facility in Vermont that is close to them, and also in Massachusetts if you're from the southern part of the state. But right now, this is the only inpatient facility. Our goal, though, is to reduce the number of kids that need inpatient care by increasing the community-based care for youth, including in the North Country.
Councilor Gadsden?
Thank you, Governor. If we're having a problem ourselves finding folks to staff different units in the state, how do we expect anybody else to get bodies to come to work?
There is an expectation that there will be recruitment outside of our state, not just within our state. The last thing we want to do is just churn people through the same system, steal people from one hospital to take to the other. That being said, children's behavioral health is a very niche area. You know, there are psychiatric nurses, and then there's children's psychiatric nurses. So most of the people that come to work at a hospital like Hampstead have a very specific interest in children's behavioral health. I do think that part of the contract that we're going to put forth for the third party, there will be a recruitment component that is outside of the state.
I just want to address one of the pieces. Councilor Warrington, I think you bring up a very good point about these funds are coming from ARP funds, which are federal funds. One thing I want to assure folks is if for some reason the federal government were to deny our use of these funds for this purpose, the state has ample capital opportunity. We would invest general funds. So what I'm really trying to say is I have full confidence we're going to get the ability to use our funds for this. But we also have managed very well. We have more money in our rainy day account than ever before, and obviously we would use general funds for this if we had to. Frankly, the state is getting an incredible deal. If you look at the fact that this is 100 licensed beds for $15 million, you literally will not find that deal anywhere else in the country. And we've got assurances that if for some reason it were to not happen, if the federal government were to deny us that, we would simply come back to you with a request, both to fiscal and through this body, to use our general funds and our capital cash to do it. So one way or another, the state will back it up if the feds won't do it for it.
There's 110 acres included with this purchase, which obviously is a beautiful piece of property. We're working very closely with the town of Hampstead to understand, to assure them that they're not going to experience any type of revenue loss when it comes to changing hands from private to state. So that was one of the concerns that was brought up early on in the discussions, that Hampstead Hospital right now is a major revenue source for taxes to the town of Hampstead, which is a very small town. So we're working very closely with them and the governor's office to make sure that there's no harm when it comes to that area.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion on this or other items. Oh, sorry, Councilor King, please. All in favor of items 6 through 7B, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And with that, the items are approved. I now ask for motion to adopt agenda item 7C from the Department of Health and Human Services from the Division of Finance and Procurement. What is?
We didn't have a motion or
7B-1? Okay, so there is a 7B-1. And it is part of this. Okay, I apologize. So what I'm going to ask, I apologize. Thank you for catching that, Councilor Warmington. I would begin by, I'm going to go backwards and ask for a motion to adopt Agenda 7B-1. I apologize, I didn't have it here. From the Department of Health and Human Services from the Office of the Commissioner.
So moved.
Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 7B-1 is approved. Thank you, Councilor Warmington. I now ask for a motion to adopt Agenda Item 7C from the Department of Health and Human Services from the Division of Finance and Procurement.
So moved.
Any discussions? Councilor Kenny.
Governor, I respectfully support the vaccine delivery contract for the federally qualified health centers and voluntary school-based community clinics. These vaccine clinics will be used through the regional public health networks. I've had a chance to visit a few of my federally qualified health network providers and use of community health services as well as county community health and state health. And this is going to bolster the effort to deliver in rural areas of this vaccine program, which is needed. Currently, right now, they have supplies. They've got vaccines. They've got the ventilators. They've got equipment that they need in order to fulfill their obligations to public health. But this will be an additional resource that is needed. And lastly, I would just thank the fiscal committee for taking out the language that concerned us in the last meeting. Thank you, sir.
Councilor Warmington.
Yes, Commissioner, these are ARPA funds, correct?
Yes.
And the funds that were rejected previously were CDC funds and not ARPA funds, right?
That is correct.
So these funds never had the language that the council was concerned about.
Correct.
Right? And you are using ARPA funds in place of the $4.5 million of funds that were rejected by the council at its last meeting, right?
Yes, that is correct.
So this means that we have $4.6 million less in ARPA funds to spend on other needed services, is that right?
Yes.
And can you explain what kind of services you're talking about?
I think the intent to use ARPA funds was to fill gaps in a variety of systems. As you can see, Hampstead Hospital is a great example of that, but also things like provider relief, long-term care relief, recruitment efforts, unemployment, things like that. That is the intent of the ARP funds. So yes, by using ARP funds to backfill money that should have been received by the CDC is going to deplete that account, and those funds will not be able to be used for those other purposes.
And does accepting these ARPA funds make up for the rejection of the entire $27 million of CDC funds?
No. The remainder of, the balance of the $27 million, the department is currently really looking at it and deciding what is the critical need out of the $27 million that we could use potentially ARPA funds for moving forward. I think the concern is that the language in the CDC grant will likely appear in other grants coming in the future. And are we going to continue to reject those funds and need to backfill with ARPA funds? Because if we do that, we're talking tens of millions of dollars that we're pulling out of our very flexible spending ARPA funds to backfill money that should have been received by the CDC.
And we're just hearing this week that we're expecting approval of the vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds. We have the Pfizer booster available, and Moderna and Johnson & Johnson will be available. And will the lack of these funds hinder our efforts to vaccinate grant students?
I think initially you will see a delay when you look at our our system to provide vaccination, there are, let's say, 5 spokes on that wheel. 2 of those spokes are the regional public health networks doing school-based clinics, and the other is the FQHCs doing community-based clinics. Now, even though fiscal approved this $4.8 million on Friday, and the governor and council may approve it today, this is just the accept component of this process. I need to now go back and contract with those entities and bring the contracts back before the council, which is not going to happen prior to the children's vaccine being released. So I think what you'll see, we'll have plenty of vaccine in our state, but the ability to get an appointment instead of currently, or even as often as last week, or as recent as last week, you could call and make an appointment for your vaccine tomorrow. And when you have all of the boosters coming online at the same time and 125,000 5 to 11-year-olds that become eligible, that ability to get an appointment is going to be delayed because we don't have all the providers on board because of the delay in this money that we're seeing in this item today.
I just want to say I applaud your efforts to find other funding to backfill the council's board decision to reject the CPC funds. Thank you.
Sorry, any further discussion on item 7C? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of item 7C, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Noting none are opposed, item 7C is approved. I now ask for motion to adopt agenda items 8 and 9 from the Department of Health and Human Services from the Division of Public Health Services.
Second.
Any discussion?
So at the last meeting, I asked that the governor bring back the family planning contract at every meeting until they were approved by the council, and I just first make a note that they are not on today's agenda. I would like to talk about the public health issues related to family planning. I had the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Barry Smith earlier this week. He's an obstetrician at Dartmouth-Hitchcock Hospital, and I learned some very interesting things about maternal fetal health in New Hampshire. He stated that the United States does not rank all that well in the world when it comes to maternal fetal health, but that New Hampshire, in fact, ranks very high. And by organizations that grade maternal fetal health, New Hampshire is one of only 4 states in the Union to get a B+, and no states rank higher than that. And it's not easy for a rural state to achieve that. But he also said that our system is fragile. It's critically dependent on being able to recruit and retain physicians who subspecialize in maternal fetal health. And if you can't recruit maternal fetal health specialists, the general obstetricians won't have a place to refer complicated pregnancies and won't feel safe practicing in our state. He noted that we currently have only 4.5 FTE maternal fetal physicians practicing in our state. Some are approaching retirement. He also noted that the newly enacted 24-week abortion ban, which criminalizes physician conduct, is a, quote, clear and present danger to the provision of obstetrical care in our state. He said that speaking with physicians at Dartmouth-Hitchcock, they believe the specialty physicians will be afraid to come to our state, and if they don't come, the general obstetricians won't come either. We've already had 10 maternity programs close in our state in recent years. We have maternity deserts in our state where women drive hours to receive maternity care. Do you agree that we need to do everything we can to protect our fragile maternal fetal health care system?
Yes, I think that it makes sense that specialty and subspecialty providers would typically settle in states that are more supportive and less restrictive around family planning and abortion. The more restrictive we become, the less attractive New Hampshire becomes for those specialties. And you are correct that there are very big gaps in our state when it comes to maternal and child health around inpatient obstetrics, things like that. And I do think that this has the potential to make that worse. What you are going to see from DHHS in the future, probably in calendar year 2022, is proposals to try to financially incentivize different health systems to continue to provide comprehensive labor and delivery service in certain parts of the state where you're exactly right, women have to drive hours to receive women's health.
And do you believe that this is an important public health matter? And that criminalizing doctors presents a threat to the system and a threat to women and children in our state?
Yes.
Synchronize here. So we're talking about obstetrical care. Littleton Hospital, I had a visit there last week and spoke to the leadership team there. Their birthing center, if you will, loses $1 million a year. The state subsidizes a small unit up at ABH up in Berlin. So my question is, we support Berlin with a small birthing center, but we don't with Littleton with regards to funding. And they're at the point where, because of other issues, I won't bring them up here, but if they don't get some support, they're going to lose, they'll start in their birthing care as well. So I guess my point is, have we had discussions with Littleton Hospital with regards to their birthing center and supporting it with state funds?
We actually subsidized their birthing center by $1 million last year.
That was last year. What about this year?
So exactly what I was just talking about is we're looking at a longer-term plan to create incentive and subsidy programs in different pockets of the state, Littleton being one, to go long-term. The issue that we have is right now we only control the Medicaid population, which only accounts for about 30% of the births. So we have to engage not just the Medicaid system, but the commercial providers to make sure that there is access to this care all across the state, all across all the payers of this. So yes, the intent is to find a longer-term incentive-type program for different pockets, including Littleton.
Well, the obstetrics, budget up there this year is going to be a major loss leader, and so here to help facilitate meetings, because if we lose that in the North Country, that's it. And there aren't midwives in the North Country. There's very few midwifery network up in the North Country. So those in hospitals are a critical point.
We agree, and I think that you will see what we come up with will obviously come in front of this council when we do the contracts with those facilities.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Further discussion? Councilor Gaffney?
Again, we got more of a general question. We have contracts that we have accepted in the past, contracts that are on this agenda, and I'm sure contracts that will be coming forward. Does that put us in do any of these contracts include federal contracts to put us in jeopardy of the entire state, employees having to be vaccinated going forward? Has it been looked at?
We don't have guidance on the federal mandate, so it's hard to answer. I guess when we get the guidance from the federal mandate, if there's a federal mandate, then we will have to review our contracts to see how it impacts our vendors, the state, and everybody else. But right now, we don't know what the details are around the federal mandate.
If I may, the state would not get, I think it's a very, very good question, by the way. The state would not be identified as a contractor. As you know, the federal government is requiring that they're contractors, but the state is not a contractor. As the federal government may provide funds directly to, for example, Medicaid facilities, they have Medicaid contracting stipulations directly between the federal government and those facilities. So that is an example where the state really isn't involved. We don't have any sort of mandate, but the contracting requirements of the federal government would potentially, or already have actually, hit a lot of the facilities that take those Medicaid dollars. I think Medicare as well.
Yes, Medicare.
hospital. My fear is that we used federal funds to do it. And my question is, does the federal government come back and say, you're mandated to have all your state employees vaccinated because you're using federal funds? If we can just look into it so that we're prepared to move.
No, we have, and I can tell you, and we are very prepared, if they were to come back and say that, we would sue the administration immediately, without question. There'd be grounds.
The issue around mandating specifically in a hospital, Hampstead Hospital, New Hampshire Hospital, Lenseth Home, all accept Medicare and Medicaid dollars. So at the point when the federal government releases guidance around mandates when it comes to healthcare and CMS, that's where we need the guidance to understand how that impacts our state facilities, because the choices are going to be, obviously the governor has committed to suing the federal government for any such mandate, but do we not accept any of the federal reimbursement, which is tens of millions of dollars, or do we go through with requiring our employees to be vaccinated? We don't have that information, and we won't have it until the guidance comes out.
And I think you bring up a good point. It's not just about the Medicaid and Medicare. It's $78 federal dollars. And repurpose it. I didn't hear that. If we accept those federal dollars, in theory, it would just be our dollars. It could be federal transportation dollars. It could be federal money being received through Fish and Game. It could be anything. Because once they start down that path, they're basically saying all government agencies that utilize federal dollars would be required to have a mandate. There isn't any indication that's where they're going, obviously. But the Medicaid and Medicare contracts are very different and would apply not just to state facilities, but really all facilities that accept Medicare and Medicaid help.
We're also talking about pulling funding to those contracts across the country if you're not meeting the requirements. And I understand you're going to sue, and that's fine. But there's an awful lot of contracts on this agenda and other agendas moving forward that put us in a position. I would just like to have somebody be prepared to answer the question, because I think the commissioner was clear that they didn't look into it yet, because they shouldn't, because you're going to sue them.
I know the Attorney General's looking at this pretty closely, so he's this super.
Yeah, Counselor, we are monitoring that. It is possible the federal government may get aggressive enough and start approaching state agencies and trying to assert that they're contractors, but we're watching that closely, and we're planning to push back on that if that happens. To this point, they haven't been that aggressive on that front, but we're watching it closely, and we're in communication with every state agency. And if they do decide to take that position, we will take legal action at that point.
Have we checked with other states to see if federal government's gone after any of them?
We are in communication with other states. I don't know of any instance in which the federal government has gotten to the point where they've insisted a state agency implement a mandate because they have a contract with the federal government, but yes, we are in contact with other states.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add my 2 cents on that, because when you're talking to senior leadership of hospitals, Harvey District, you get information that you normally wouldn't get if you didn't show up. One of my hospitals, Northern Hospitals, indicated that if CMS came down with a vaccine mandate, it was a need for 20% of their workforce. Another hospital mentioned they would lose 12% of their workforce. So it is, for me personally, who represents North New Hampshire, whether, take a vaccine or not, understand that might be an employment condition, but we are going to lose a lot of our workforce. On the defense contracting side, some of my companies who work with the federal government, as defense contractors, they have also indicated that if the mandate comes down into their workforce, one of them has indicated they lose a third of their workforce. So these mandates coming out of Washington on the vaccine front are going to really affect how we do business here in New Hampshire. So, Mr. Attorney General, I appreciate you working on this, being diligent, and providing us information what's coming out of Washington, because it's going to have an impact if they stretch their arm even further. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. The contractor mandate has its own unique, or the contractor executive order has its unique challenges, because what the executive order just does is direct federal agencies to try to get these provisions into contracts where they can. So it really is a case-by-case basis where we have to monitor and see who they're approaching and coming after.
Councilor Hampstead?
Thank you, Governor. Hampstead Hospital will have more than 100 employees. They'll be seeking federal funds. What does that do to the third-party administrator that's coming in about finding staff that's got to be vaccinated to receive those federal funds when employed? I think that the discussions with them would include that kind of conversation.
It will.
And to be clear, if and when the OSHA 100-employee mandate, which we've heard about, we've seen some language on, truly gets implemented, it would affect not just Hampstead Hospital, but all the bulk of our third-party providers in a variety of ways. The Alvarez and Monsarles who do work for us, the Deloitte that do work for us. We work with literally probably 100 organizations just in the state and over 100 private employees, so it's going to be a nationwide shockwave.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that we're moving forward looking at it.
Further discussion on any of either 8, 9, or general public health discussion? Okay, seeing no further discussion, all in favor of items 8 and 9, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The items are approved. I now ask for motion to adopt agenda item 10 from the Department of Health and Human Services from Glenfield Home. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item 10 is approved. I'll ask for a motion to adopt agenda item 11 from the Department of Health and Human Services from New Hampshire Hospital.
Second.
Any discussion? Councilor Stevens.
I'm not noting a delineation between hourly rates for RNs versus LPNs.
Hot joke.
Good morning, Councilor. Thanks for the question. There isn't one. So the conversation we had with Maxim was that they could find us LPNs or RNs. We would really take any staff that are available at this point in time. Most of the LPNs that have been identified so far for the 6 FTEs that we currently have contracted, they've worked at Glenfield Home, and the focus at New Hampshire Hospital is more on the RN side. There's not a delineation of rate per se.
Are we emphasizing with like RNs?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry, further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of item 11, thank you. Please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item 11 is approved. I now ask for a motion to adopt agenda items 12 through 17 from the Department of Health and Human Services from the Division of Behavioral Health.
Second.
Any discussion? Council Barnes.
Item 12. So this is money to cover the cost of a court appointed consultant among the organizations under its folks receivership. And I'm just wondering, is there state funding that's been provided to this organization that will not be recovered as a result of its financial failure if they are not able to reorganize?
I'm going to bring Katja Fox down to answer some of those questions.
So good morning. For the record, I'm Katja Fox. I'm the Director of the Division for Behavioral Health. And I got some of your questions, but not the entire thing. It was something about the funds and if they fail and they're in contract.
Everybody else is going on. So my question is, are there funds that have been provided to this organization that are going to be lost as a result of its financial failure?
So now I understand the question. The organization is very much alive and on its path to getting well. So by going into receivership, we were able to have Ms. Nyhan go in and take an assessment of where everything is at, from everything going on with the organization, including the financial aspect. We do not anticipate a failure of this organization. In fact, they're currently seeking an executive director, and that's been posted, and recruitment efforts are underway. We have seen staff who stayed. There was concern that we have a mass exodus of staff. As a result of this, that has not happened. So there's some recruitment going on for a couple of vacancies. And Ms. Nyhan and our staff went out and visited the sites, because there are multiple locations in that North Country, and found everything to be in order, very engaged staff, but more importantly, that people are being served. And so there actually has been an increase in the last couple months of individuals who have used these peer support services.
So just in retrospect, do you think there's anything that the department could have done to detect the need for receivership at an earlier point, so that it wouldn't have gotten to that point?
In fact, we did recognize that this was an organization that was struggling, especially at the management level. And so we had been working with them, providing technical assistance and hand-in-hand monitoring over a period of time. And the Attorney General could probably speak to this. It's an extraordinary action to take this next step.
Yeah, I can just say a couple words to that. So our Division of Charitable Trust is very aware of this and has been working with Ms. Nyhan on the receivership. Katya's right. There are issues at the organization, but it is still very much operating. Services are being provided. This is a mix between management and financial issues. I'd say the bigger issues are with management, and management has been removed. The receiver is in there, has control of the organization. We're looking for the receiver, I should say, we're looking for a new executive director. So I think the situation is very much under control, but we're going to be monitoring it closely. But as of now, everything appears to be stable.
Well, I just want to say I do appreciate you taking the steps that you needed to take to get the receiver appointed, so that the funds that the state has invested in this facility can be protected. And I appreciate knowing that you are monitoring all of these organizations. They're small, they're getting a lot of money, and could be struggling at any time. So it's good to know that you are monitoring them. Thank you.
So their audits in 19 and 20 were fine, and up to June 30th of 2020, they were fine. So my question is, they did receive payroll protection. Their board of directors essentially abandoned the program, correct? So are they, I guess my question is, are they fully utilizing, or really utilizing additional COVID supports through CARES funding? And what is being done in terms of rebuilding the board and/or the board liability at this point?
Yeah, so the Ms. Nyhan is still going through her assessment of the organization. The initial task was to ensure that everything was stable, and with management having been removed, and with the misdeeds that were being committed being stopped, the organization can continue to operate. She's working on rebuilding the board, getting the remaining members engaged, again, recruiting a new executive director. But as far as liability for board members, as far as potential criminal liability for management, that's certainly being investigated and being looked at. But we're fairly early on in the process. The receiver really just took over a month and a half, a couple months ago. So that's, as to what actions were committed in the past that people need to be held responsible for, that's absolutely being looked at, but that's still in process. The first priority was to stabilize the organization, and that has been achieved.
Thank you.
Additional discussion? Okay, all those in favor of items 12 through 17, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Those are approved. I now ask for a motion to adopt agenda items 18 through 20A from the Department of Health and Human Services from the Division of Economic and Health and Stability.
So moved.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Those items are approved. I ask for a motion to adopt agenda items 21 through 24 from the Department of Health and Human Services from the Division of Long-Term Supports and Services.
So moved.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those items are approved. I now ask for a motion to adopt agenda items 25 through 28 from the Department of Health and Human Services from the Division of Children, Youth, and Families.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion from 25 through 28? Seeing none, all in favor? Oh, okay, sorry. Councilor Withers.
Thank you, Governor. I'm curious about item 26, for recruiting. Have we done any analysis to why these people are leaving and at what office they might be leaving at with exit interviews and such as that?
Yes, I'm going to have Joe Ripson talk about it in detail.
Yes, thank you for the question, Councilor. For the record, Joe Ripson, Director of DCYF. As folks here are well aware, the child protection system in this state has been under a pretty tough period of time for probably going on a decade that we've been working hard to turn around. A big part of that has been what really was 5 years ago absolutely crushing caseloads for staff. Caseloads up around 90 when the national standards 12. We've put remarkable resources into hiring up staff and trying to get our caseloads to a reasonable level so folks can actually do the work they need to do and feel good about the work that they do. And we've made a lot of progress. We're now at the point where I think last month the average was 16, but still not down to the average that we need to get to, which is about 12. Through that process, we've had a hard time retaining and hiring folks, really in all offices throughout the state. But what we've seen shift differently, particularly since, say, November of last year, was the number of qualified applicants coming forward. And when we talked to folks about why we weren't seeing qualified applicants coming forward, the reason they gave was salary. They could go to any of our 3 neighboring states and receive about $10,000 more. And in that environment, the ability to actually recruit the new staff has been incredibly tough. Retention has been an issue as well. The retention side of it, it's something I've lived through this before. I worked in New Jersey for 10 years before I came here and was part of rebuilding their system as well. We had to massively grow their child welfare workforce as well at that time. And when you're hiring a lot of new people into a very complicated and difficult role like a child protective service worker, there are people who come on board and they realize that this isn't the right work for them, that it's something that they just weren't ready for or weren't prepared for. So you're going to continue to see, I would say, based on my past experience, some turnover continue as we continue to build out the system to stabilize it. But if we can't get the right qualified people in the front door in the first place, we're never going to get to that point. So that's, I think, what we're really seeing here is a big part of it is driven by the fact that our wages are just not competitive with our 3 neighboring states.
So to answer the exit view question more specifically, you didn't have people saying that there was a management issue that
We've had
work for and it's all a pay issue? I mean, did you analyze those?
Yes.
All the exit interviews?
It's certainly not solely a pay issue. Right? There's a number of reasons why folks raise during exit interviews as to why they're leaving. A lot of folks that are leaving actually are leaving because of retirement and because of being promoted to other roles within the division of the department. We also have a lot of folks who leave claiming that the workload is just too much for them to handle, and the only way we can get over that issue is by being able to bring enough folks to do the job. And you do have some folks who leave because of personality issues and other things that they just, they're not comfortable within the office. But a key part of that has been the salary issue, particularly more so on the recruitment side than on the retention side.
Thank you.
Further discussion on any of these items? Okay, we'll vote. I think like one of the differences between Hampstead would be, that would be a third-party contractor, and so there's more flexibility there for a variety of reasons. Councilwoman, can I have a question?
I and I think all the councilors have received a number of calls about this item. Lots of concerns about why we're using this patchwork of temporary fixes rather than finding a long-term solution. It seems like we manage by crisis when we find an area that we're just unable to recruit or retain staff because our wages have fallen so low. We finally put a Band-Aid on that particular problem, but then there's just another leak in the dike somewhere else. And what do you see as a longer-term solution to this problem?
I agree with you, Counselor, that for the most part, specifically in the department, but I'm sure in all the departments in state government, we have relied heavily on doing enhancements for different professions. I know nurses, occupational therapists, firms, we've seen all of it. So typically what an organization would do is to evaluate their wage scale and their wage study, and I'm sure Commissioner Arlinghouse could speak a little bit to that.
We do a lot of wage enhancements in the state, and the way the state system works is complicated and it's more restrictive than in a lot of in a private business. If there are 5 of you in a business, it's very easy to look at somebody and say, geez, I think Cassie's doing a great job, that I'm just going to give her a 20% raise because I just can. And if Joe doesn't like it, he's out of luck because I'm deciding to value her. You can't do that in the state. You will never be able to do that in the state, and we shouldn't be able to do that in the state. The system is designed to be in many ways very constrictive, but the goal of that is sort of an across-the-board equity in pay wages and in pay and in trying to address how pay is done throughout the state. There's a temptation in the part, you will always have some manager who wants to reward people by giving everybody a raise. And what happens then is you've got I'm going to say 40 departments in the state, depends on how you count things as a department, but you'll have pockets where that's what people do, and that's how they're going to spend their appropriated money, and you'll have pockets where they suppress wages in order to allow themselves to have more people or to spend more money on a particular program or something like that. It's always going to be important, and if you think about the origins of the so-called merit system, and you don't have to go back to Garfield getting assassinated, but just go back to the 30s and 40s, and the point of it is a broad equity, and so there's meant to be some constrictions on that. If you have a system with that level of constriction, you're also required to have some ways to assess those things. There are a lot of mechanisms in our system. We're doing a lot of work on changing the system. We're well into a project to simplify the system. 1,200 job classifications down to 290 is our goal over the course of the next 1.5 to 2 years, and getting to that system. But you're always going to have needs around market-based wage problems, right? So our system does not necessarily take into account market discrepancies. You're always going to have areas where the market is greater and lower. We're probably in the next month, let's just say, going to release a compensation study that was part of one of the last budget processes. I looked at Cassie because I think it's in her inbox right now. We're looking at drafts, and probably what that will show is what everybody knows. Everybody in the state already knows sort of where we are in wages. The state, as a general rule, has lower wages, cash wages, than comparable jobs in the private sector, and it has significantly greater benefits than comparable jobs in the private sector. This makes us much less attractive than Google to a 24-year-old who typically does not have a family, although some 24-year-olds do. And it makes us much more attractive to people who are much older than that and are interested in a family. And the health insurance benefit is much more there in the state. So that will always be there. Can you address things across the board? You could. You could look at nurses being underpaid and you could address it 20, 10, 20, 30% increase across the board. We don't do that. Most of the enhancements that the commissioner talks about are in healthcare professions. There are very few enhancements. I don't have a comprehensive list, although I'm planning on getting one. I'm going to do it to myself. But they're almost entirely in professions that are essentially healthcare related. And you're always going to need to do that because you're never going to have a system where, medical examiners are always going to have to make a lot more money than how complicated their job is, because there just aren't that many people who want to do that. Okay? And nurses are probably always going to be compensated. I think enhancements are actually a reasonable tool because what we're doing is targeting a specific area of need, a specific problem that we can address and confine. I'm going to tell you there are wages are, let's just say wages are 10% lower across the board than the private sector. Yeah, but maybe not in my position and maybe in Joe's position. And it's very hard to figure out that equity. We know nurses are an issue. We know nurses are underpaid and the market we can't address that. You can target market forces that way. And so I think enhancements are a good thing. And you're required to relook at them every 3 years, but not in a way that's, I think, excessively burdensome. Are you going to do another nurse enhancement? Of course you are. We all know that, and people are like, well, why can't we make it permanent? It would require us to change our system. And the paperwork required to do a nurse enhancement is not overly burdensome, but we're able to target nurses that way. That was a little too much, but...
Thank you. I appreciate the information. I will say, though, that I would like for us to be looking at some longer terms. This particular one, I totally support this, as these are important child protection services, but you are inviting the same problem to happen in another department that isn't getting the raise. And next, we're going to be doing an enhancement in another department. So an overall look, a return maybe to the bargaining table, or a look at our classification pay wages, I think would be in order.
When we do release the comp study, and like I said, it's in a month or so, and there are certain people we're required to give it to, Governor, Speaker, Senate President, but I'll make sure everybody here gets a copy too.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. All right, Charlie.
Okay. Well, a few years ago, Commissioner, I was fighting the wars about the kind of the job description of a child protective service worker, in that I had someone who wanted to apply for that position coming out of a degree program at Plymouth State University. However, somehow the curriculum and the job description and requirements didn't quite match up, and there wasn't really a lot of leeway to create a feeder program through that program at PSU to allow them to be hired. We fought the great battle, and after several months, they were eventually hired. So when we're looking at this particular worker, we have to understand that we need to make it a little bit more flexible from the higher learning institutions and how they might be able to access these jobs. Because the other thing too is while this is an enhancement, pay raise, what do we do about the coworkers who might be in other professions who work side by side with these people who didn't get the raise and feel alienated, who are equally, a professional? What is it the department communicates to that second segment of the workforce? How do we communicate and say, help us on the way, you're going to get yours? Because in essence, we'll be turning off one workforce who might just, well, heck with it, I'm leaving, I'm underpaid, and I'm appreciated, but this workforce suddenly got a pay raise.
I think one of the greatest management challenges, and this is true in the public sector, the private sector, and I think that actually covers everyone, right? Unless there's another sector. But it is differential in pay. Everybody actually knows what everybody makes, even if you keep it secret. In the state, everybody knows what everybody makes because we publish it every year. And it's on the state website. And that's always an issue, and it's always an issue where people who work side by side. I started at this salary. Geez, I had to start at step 1 and hired Fred at step 3. That's always going to be a problem, and it's a challenge. The way you address challenges like that is through honesty and talking about it. And one of the things that I think we want to do is you don't want to say to one group of people, I know that we have a significant issue that desperately needs addressing, but we're not going to address it, because if I give you a raise, I got to give 10,000 other people a raise too. I'm not saying 10,000 people shouldn't get a raise, and I think it's very important from a bargaining standpoint. We've talked about this, because the governor is the bargainer on the one side of the table, and that we have sort of equity, that you're not like picking and choosing and all that. But sometimes you do have to pick and choose. Sometimes there are going to be inequities, and it's obvious with things like nurses. And I think one of the ways you address that is just to be honest with people and say sometimes we have to make a decision, and this is something we have to do. Does that make everybody happy? No, but we make decisions every day that don't make everybody happy. In terms of flexibility in hiring, I think it's critically important, and I agree with you. It's actually something we've looked at a lot internally over the last 2 or 3 years and with the HR community statewide. One of the things that we're trying to encourage is people to have a great deal more flexibility at the beginning of the hiring process. There have been errors in the past, and I say errors, I don't mean anybody was acting badly. It's just that people were overly formulaic in certifying people for jobs. You don't qualify for this job, you do qualify for this job. We actually adopted a rule change. I'm very proud of this because I actually wrote this rule myself in July, which is to say that education and experience can be swapped for each other on a one-for-one basis, so that we don't overvalue education or overvalue experience in the world today. I had an experience where I had somebody qualified for a job because he was doing the job, and it's just that the actual position opened up that he'd been doing because somebody finally retired, and everybody knew that he was exactly who should get the job, and he couldn't because he didn't take the last 3 courses to get his bachelor's degree 20 years ago. And it's ridiculous to make him go back to school and find whatever elective was offered that year to get his degree when he had 16, whatever it was, years of experience. There's no way around it, so we now have that rule. It's actually opened up. I've seen it internally and heard directly from other hiring managers about there are people they wanted to hire before that they can't hire now. We do need more access. We do need more flexibility. It doesn't mean that everybody who graduates from every program is going to get a job, but it does mean if we approach it sensibly, it can happen.
Any other discussion on these items? Okay. All in favor of items 25 through 28, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Voting the no, motion